and it's another Saturday live stream. Paul Tobey here from Jazz Mental. Thanks for joining me for another one of these tutorial sessions. Great to see you all here. And for the regulars and early risers, I appreciate the fact that you've already joined the chat. For those of you that have not yet joined the chat, please do so with your name and where you're from. And I would like to say hello to Rich and Ben and Lawrence from the UVI, James from Calgary, Shell from Detroit, Keith, Honolulu, Don from just around the corner in Niagara-on-the-Lake, which, by the way, it's raining and miserable and cold here, so perfect day to be working on tunes. And we've got Jean-Pierre from France and Curtis from Virginia, Alan, North Carolina, and everybody else who's not yet joined the chat, welcome. Just a quick sound check. Let me know that you can hear my voice okay, and a couple of chords on the piano, and let me know if that is a good sound. And I'd appreciate the feedback. So today we are working on a suggestion from one of our advanced class participants, Lawrence, who suggested the tune, What Is This Thing Called Love? It's a Cole Porter song. Funnily enough, it's not actually from a musical. It was written as a group of pieces, and it didn't ever make its way into a musical. I think it should have. It's an actually nice tune. And we're going to discover all of the changes and everything to do with the tune. Let me just throw a quick lead sheet up here. And in addition to that lead sheet, I've actually gone ahead, recorded a solo, and then transcribed that solo, and I'm going to give that to you as today's free download. Let me throw that up on the screen first. It's here, and you can see that it includes left-hand comping and right-hand soloing lines. And let me put a link to that right now in the chat area. I'm also going to pin it to the top of the chat so that you can go and download it. I want somebody to go do that now so that you can give me some feedback and let me know that the download actually worked. So I pinned it to the top of the chat. There you go. Grab that sheet music. It's not necessary to have it for this session. So if you get to the website and it times out on you, it's just because a whole bunch of people are doing the same thing at the same time. And it'll be there throughout the duration of today's session and will cease to operate upon the completion of today's session. So what I'm going to do is, as everybody keeps joining the chat area, Claudio and Emoti, nice to see you again, and a few others, I'm going to remove the sheet music from, well, actually, let me put up the lead sheet so you can follow along the changes. Okay, there's the lead sheet on the screen. And I'm going to play through the tune. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to come out, but the focus today is going to be on bebop lines. Very traditional bebop lines. So lots of bebop scales, lots of enclosures, bebop rhythms, and such, so that we can talk about these things specifically. And what you're listening for is not only that, but how sweet the lines can be if you're focused on the bebop language and the changes that pass by. The changes are very important in this tune. They're not difficult to do. It's an AABA structure, and I'm going to play it, and then we'll talk about it. All right, Don, thanks for the feedback that the download works. I appreciate that. And Karen, welcome. Thanks for joining us again. And Alan and Francine and James and everybody else who's joined. So, Alan says, when putting in the required information on the page, you get an error. I've never seen that before. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but other people are having success with it. So my suggestion is you clear your browser cache or use a different browser. So for example, if you're using Chrome, maybe switch to Firefox and try that, but also clear out the cache and make sure that you've done that before trying to download, because I believe it works. If you get an error message, it could also be it's just timing out during the session. So give it a few minutes and go and check it out. All right. Hey, Jamie, how are you doing? And York from Berlin. Got some nice representation from all over the planet today, so that's good. So the first thing I'm going to do is just talk quickly about the changes. If you take a look at the sheet music that's on your screen right now, all it is a 2-5-1 of F minor. And it's important to play the half diminished seventh chord because that's what gives it this flavor. And I'm going to talk about specifically this note in a little bit. A flat, which is, it's an interesting note as far as the whole tune goes because, and I'll introduce this a little bit more in a second, because it's a passing note for a lot of the chords that are being used here. So the focus is on the flat 3 of F minor, and then a 2-5-1 of C major. And then you can throw these passing notes in here, which is A flat, you guessed it. And the reason why we do that is because it's the bebop scale. So that bebop scale is really important to the C major chord. So one more time, in the B section, it's a 2-5-1 of F minor. And then a 2-5-1 of C major. But it's still D half diminished seventh to G7 to C major. It's a favorite for jam sessions and jazz musicians because it's fairly simple. 2-5-1 of F minor, 2-5-1 of C major. Now, of course, you can play this in any key you like, but that's the standard key. It's the one from the real book. And then in the bridge, it's almost the same thing, except it's a 2-5-1 of B flat major. And then it does an A flat 7 chord. And then a 2-5-1 of C minor. Back to G. Now, here at the end over the D flat 7, you don't necessarily need to do that. You can also play D half diminished seventh. D flat 7 is a bit of a reharm. Hardly anybody ever plays this tune as a ballad, even though it's a love song. Most people play it as a medium to up-tempo standard. And it's fun to play. So the focus today is going to be on bebop and figuring out some lines. So the first thing I'm going to do is refer to this piece of sheet music, which is a solo that I transcribed. So if you actually look at the first line, and I didn't actually practice this, so I'm just sort of winging it here. So the goal of this sheet music, and when I played, I was really trying to be authentic to the bebop style. And so we're going to look and analyze some of these bebop ideas. So let's take a look at bar 1. And I think to make this easier, I'm going to take a screenshot and place that on your screen so I can write on it and make sure that we know where we are. Okay, so there's the screenshot. And that means I can now write on the screen as soon as I find my pen. Here it is. So the first thing is take a look at this chord here, or this voicing. So what you have is a G half diminished seventh chord in root position, like this. And then instead of playing the flat 3, we're going to play a C natural. So this is also a voicing for E flat 7. It's also a voicing for A7, but it works well for the G half diminished seventh chord. And then take a look at the melody. So what we're trying to do is follow the chord itself and then take a look at any destination notes, which I consider this one. I'll just put a little D on top of it here. So what it is a little riff and then an enclosure surrounding that note, over, under, and back to the note. So you could have done it like this, or this, or this. But basically, it's the sound of that enclosure that makes it sound like bebop. And then on to the C7 flat 9 chord. So again, we're doing the same thing. This is the destination note, and you've got 4 notes in front of it. Now, Barry Harris talks about that, and he says, you know, if you're trying to make it your way to a destination note, put in as many passing notes as you need to, and figure out a way to enclose that destination at the same time. So all of these are just passing notes. So the sound of bebop is like this. Bebop, bebop. So it's one thing to kind of look at that on the sheet music. It's another thing to feel it. You really have to get the feel of bebop. It's really ending on and accenting the ands of the beat. If you take a look at the ending, this is just all F7, F minor 7 here. All of these notes are just part of the F7 chord, and so is this. And then at the end, you've just got this little enclosure leading to the C natural. So here's the line again. And then on to the D half diminished seventh chord. Let me just check in with you at the chat area, because I can't do the chat, look at that and look at the sheet music at the same time. Let's just see if there's any comments or questions about what we've talked about so far. I tend to get very deeply involved in analysis, and sometimes you can go a little bit too far before checking in with people and make sure they're still awake and paying attention. Yes, the PDF only has 2 pages. It's a lot, I think, to learn, even if you just have the 2 pages. I could have made it 4 or 6 or whatever, but it takes a long time to transcribe these things. So 2 pages will do. And there's a lot of language in those 2 pages. All right. If there's no questions, I'll just go back to the sheet music and keep analyzing. Let's erase some of this so that we can continue on. Now, I always think about these things in phrases. So if you take a look at whenever there's a quarter note here, it's kind of either the end of a short phrase or part of a longer phrase, which is this one. So I often think about these things in 2-bar, 3-bar, 4-bar, or even 6-bar phrases that kind of just go until they end. End of the phrase. So all of that fits together, but there's destination notes which end smaller little sentences in the entire phrase. Or I should say the longer sentence, and then the phrases are within the longer sentence. Right? That's the end of the first one. And then we're on to the same voicing here for D half diminished seventh as we had up here for G half diminished seventh. I really like these voicings because they contain that minor second in the middle. Sorry, that's a B natural. I played a B flat here. You can play a B flat if you want to, but this is B natural. So we often hear that in bebop. Right? Notice that quickly, and I tried to be authentic when I transcribed it, there's an E flat down here, and everybody's going to ask, why is there an E flat, Paul, on a C major seventh chord? And the answer is, it's because it's at the beginning of the bar, and you're transitioning from flats. This is all typically heading to C minor seventh. You've got a 2 half diminished seventh to 5/7 flat 9 heading to minor. But it goes to major. So what we want to do is we want to tie the two together, and I tied it very quickly with that E flat. One more time. And then resolved to C major 7 here. So you can see the E flat changes to E natural. So if you put those two phrases together, you get this. Okay, and I think if you actually learn it like that and don't just, I think the tendency we have is just to play through it, finding the notes. And that's fine, but what's really important here is the feel of bebop and the phrasing and the rhythm and the way the notes curl to reach destination notes. How many of you can hear the bebop in that sound? I think we tend to fall into scales like this. And it doesn't have that bebop sound. The bebop sound has those twists and turns heading to destination notes. That's the bebop sound that you're really looking for. Let's check in and see how the conversation is going. Philip says, hi, Paul and Nancy from Urbana. Nice to see you. Nancy, you're in my prayers. It's been a tough week for our Nancy. We got some bad news too this week, so we're kind of reeling from that a little bit, but we shall persevere. And her health has definitely a lot of challenges right now, and we're working on it. It's not like we're sitting back doing nothing. We're doing everything we can. So thank you for all of those people that are giving a shout out to Nancy and keeping her in your thoughts and prayers. I appreciate it. Lauren says the bridge section to A Night in Tunisia also works as bebop licks. It does for the A section of this song. So I think you're talking about this. that section. So if we actually play that over top of it. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting idea. But yeah, whatever works for you is really the rule of jazz. I mean, almost anything goes. It's just, for today, we're just trying to figure out what the authentic bebop sound is. And if you find that there's a shortcut by pulling melodies from other tunes like Night in Tunisia, whatever works for you, that's good. Thank you. So the comment is from this, I'm not sure what your name is, B dot something. It's fine to hear, but it seems far from the original melody. It's definitely far from the original melody is this. And it's a nice melody, but we're talking about jazz soloing, so we're getting far from the melody and we're figuring out improv techniques that are important for jazz players to figure out. So instead of the melody, that's an interesting thought though. If you think about it, you can play around with the melody a little bit. I think it's good if you're thinking about the melody in terms of your enclosures. So you think about the destination notes. First destination note being A flat. How do we get to that A flat with some kind of bebop line? Right? Little enclosures. Under, over, destination note. Okay? So that's the goal of today, figuring out the standard bebop language and making sure that we're adding it to our playing to be more of an authentic jazz soloist, as it were. Still people joining and saying hello, so let me say hi to Charlie and Curtis and Dick, and also a rainy day in Belgium from Emrio. And Josh says, sometimes I start a solo close to the melody, then build up to deviate more gradually to bebop. And that's, I think, what we're trying to illustrate here. Starting off with the melody. So you see what I did there? I started off just kind of playing around with the melody and splicing the melody together with little lines. And that's really, I think, something that you could spend more time doing, is really consider the melody when you solo. And that's what I'm really doing there. I'm just, again, bridging the gap, splicing the space in between this really sparse melody. It's just, there's not a lot of melody. And then 2 whole bars with nothing, and then 2 bars with nothing. So we have to fill those gaps. Yeah, I mean, the comment is I really like the idea to play around with the notes of the melody. I mean, yeah, I think it's important to keep the melody in your consciousness as you're playing your way through the tune, or subconscious for those people who are a little bit more advanced. That approaches the level of unconscious competence that we've talked about a few times in these courses, is getting from the place of unconscious incompetence through the 4 stages to unconscious competence. For those of you that don't know at all what I'm talking about, you'll have to refer to previous masterclasses, which are all on the Jazz Mental YouTube channel under the live tab in the Jazz Mental channel. So Francis says, I get to play the lines, but adding the accompaniment is difficult. The thing with accompaniment, Francia, is that you're really just kind of hitting the chords. And what I would do first is just plunk the chord down and then play the line. Plunk the chord down. And just hold it there, because until you get the chord down, it's going to be hard to comp. So when we comp, though, we're trying to comp mostly on the and of 2 and the and of 4, like this. If there's a bass player, right? And that feel, that and of 2 and and of 4, is really where the comping comes in. So if you're struggling putting the 2 hands together, it's because you haven't quite got that feel down yet. So maybe throw down a drum track or something, or a metronome, and just practice playing on the and of 4 and the and of 2. And 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, 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 and 1, 2, and 3. Okay? Hopefully that'll help a little bit with your feel. I think the best way to go over enclosure ideas, Josh, is to just kind of refer to the tune itself and the transcription that I've written. So let's just continue on, and I'll show you a few more ideas for enclosures. Really, when I'm talking about enclosures, try to understand that the meaning of an enclosure means surrounding the destination note. So we finished off our second line here, and we're going to move to the third line. Let's erase this and move on to the third line. That sounds something like this. Okay? One more time. So what we're trying to do is take a look at destination notes. So there's one. They don't always have to be quarter notes, by the way. They can be half notes. This is just C minor. Because over a C7 chord, you can use blues scales, right? Which contain a flat 3. So even though it's a C7, you can definitely use an E flat, which is a sharp 9, or part of the blues scale. So if you take a look at this first destination note here, again, this B natural, let me erase here, do it again. You take a look at that destination note, then we've got over, note, under, note. That's an interesting enclosure. Now, there's a lot of different ones, obviously, in this tune, but that's just one. Get the feel of that under your fingers. If you just hear the sound of that line and the shape of it, it just screams bebop. Notice that it ends here on the and of 4. And that's very typical of bebop. We would consider those last two notes to make the sound of bebop. It's like bebop. So the accent is on the bop. That's why the short form for bebop is bop, because the bop is the more important than the B. But again, one more time, if you listen to the sound and the shape of this line, that's a very typical bebop sound, because it's not just a scale, it's enclosures and scales and chords at the same time. Okay, and then whenever you see spaces like this, where you've got like a quarter note, the left hand fills in the space. It's, again, typically on the and of the beat. That chord is an F minor chord. Okay? So one more time. Right? Hit the and. Oh, and then again, you've got these enclosures, right? It's like over, under, over, under. This is a temporary destination note, and then this is another destination note. So I know that's hard to understand. It's like the destination note is not always a chord tone. It's not always on the beat. It's not always off the beat. It's just where it is. It's the feel and the shape of the line. Again, ultimate destination note being the F. Remember, when I'm playing and I'm improvising, I'm not thinking about that. It's just a natural feel at this time. So when I go to analyze it, it was like, oh, that was a neat idea. Again, my fingers are just feeling the shape of the thing. So from bar 9, pick up. One. Okay, let's play it one more time. It just flows and feels like bebop, and that's what you really need to wrap your head around. It's not so much, oh, this enclosure fits perfectly to lead to this destination note. That's the thought and the idea, but the feel and the rhythm is inherent in the bebop language and happens over time as you work on these lines. Then this little cool lick here. That's very typical of bebop, to use that one and you got 16th notes. Now, where does this come from? It comes from a G7 starting on the flat 9. You could even do it like this with just 3, 5, 7 and flat 9. Or I like this one because it contains that minor second at the top. And then we're on C. Okay. Let's scroll down the page. Oh, looks like that's a little too far up. How do I get that down? There we go. Okay. So now we are at the bridge. Bar 17 is the start of the bridge. So AABA tune, the 2A sections were 16 bars, and then you got the bridge, which is another 8 bars. So from the C half diminished seventh, notice the chord in the left hand is this. Oh, so this whole phrase, put an arc on it and keep going, and then it ends on bebop. That's an interesting kind of spelling the chord and then a bebop at the end. So that's something you have to pay attention to. Ending on the and of the beat. In this case, it's the and of 3. Okay? So take a look at the top of this phrase here. Just getting the notes right there. So that's very typical, again, of bebop. We had that a little bit earlier. So think about that, like if you're looking at an F7 chord, which just happened before the B flat, I'm resolving on the last bar instead of resolving it on the B flat. If you look at an F7 chord up to the flat 9 and then the sharp 9, it's pretty typical of beboppers to do this. So you've got F7, 3, 5, 7, 1, and then this line on the flat 9. So that's all I've done there. I just kind of held out the F7 chord and then ended on a bebop. So you'll notice that the notes might not be exactly what I'm playing because I haven't practiced it, but the feel and the rhythm is the most important thing. So switching from note to note, it's not going to make any difference. The line is still going to work because you've got the feel happening. And that ends that phrase. Let's go back and check in with you and see how we're doing. So Rich asks, would you analyze the harmony in the B section, please? What is the function of the A flat 7 chord? All right, let's analyze the harmony. Why not? It's an interesting idea. So the bridge starts on C half diminished seventh. Actually, typically starts on C minor, but I change it to a C half diminished seventh. It's a one note difference. So instead of this chord, you get this chord. So it contains a flat 5. So the difference between the two is marginal. And then why the A flat 7 chord? Well, if you're analyzing it, trying to figure out why an A flat 7 chord is there, it's not so much why is it there, but what did the composer think when he made the tune? So he's resolving to B flat major. So 2-5-1 in B flat major. And then he's throwing this A flat 7 chord as an idea which basically says, let's create some dissonance, keep the dissonance going, and then resolve. So 2-5-1 of B flat, resolve. And then going down a whole tone. Again, that's a composer's preference. He could have gone anywhere, but going down to the A flat 7 chord is a feel and a style and a sound that he was looking for at the time. So and then a 2-5 of C minor. Okay? Now, even though the tune doesn't go back to C minor, it's still a 2-5-1, and then it just goes on to G half diminished seventh. Okay. Now, I did want to make a reference to the A flat 7 chord in this solo. So we're starting on bar 21 here. And we're taking a look at this A flat 7 chord, which stretches this whole bar. So let's take a look at what I've played. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that on an A flat 7 chord, which is typically a D flat scale, a D flat scale, you've got all white notes. And the reason for that is in my head, I'm substituting A flat 7 for an A flat 7 altered scale, which basically means that all of the extensions are naturals. And then I'm getting down to this sort of like A flat down here. So while I'm playing, I'm just thinking, it's like, well, how does these notes fit with the A flat 7 chord? And the answer is, that's a 13, this is the third, this is the flat 9. And this note is the flat 5. So 13, flat 13, third, flat 9. So F, sort of F major over A flat. And then you've got an enclosure heading to this F sharp, which is basically the flat 7 of A flat. And we've had this before, right? That bebop line. You can't get more bebop than that. That's total language. That would be like a normal phrase in whatever language you speak. That's just a normal phrase in bebop. These are things that you learn over time. Right? You can't get more bebop than that. And then on to the D half diminished seventh. Now, all this is a D flat, or sorry, a D natural half diminished scale. If you take a look at that, it contains a G natural, which heads into the G7 flat 9 chord. So it's like a destination note. and then a bunch of enclosures heading to this C natural, which is the destination node. So the whole phrase. Let's play those two phrases together and tell me this doesn't sound like good jazz. I didn't play it right. One more time. That's just so typical, and which is why I played it and how it ended up that way. Okay? I think if you just learn this, you'll get some feel underneath your fingers, and a lot of the tendency to gravitate toward this language will happen in your playing just by virtue of the fact that your fingers are moving to these patterns automatically. And I think it's really important to practice stuff like this. You can absolutely analyze the heck out of it, but like I said, at the end of the day, it's just a feel thing that needs to be underneath your fingers in order to accomplish it. And then this last phrase on G half diminished seventh. Let me get the notes right here. Okay. Again, it's just so me, right? And so bebop. And then and so on and so forth. Just learn it. It'll be fun to learn, and I hope you have fun with it. It's a lot of work went into transcribing it, so I hope you enjoy it. Okay, let's check in with you. Yeah, so you get that same thing in countless songs. The scale of choice is E flat melodic minor, which makes the connection to the minor 4 more obvious. Let me think about that for a second. The scale of choice is E flat melodic minor, which makes the connection to minor 4 more obvious. Not exactly sure what you mean, but I think that's, again, we had comments like this earlier, someone putting the bridge to Night in Tunisia over the head section. Again, it's just like whatever works for you and whatever way you think about it, that's great. I love the feedback, though. It's awesome. A flat 7 is a tritone substitution of D7, yes, before you go to D minor 7. That's true, except you're not going to D minor, you're going to D half diminished. So A flat 7, if you actually resolved it as a tritone substitution, would go to G minor. So going to D half diminished 7th doesn't really fit. It's just continuing the dissonance, right? Modi. I love this. It's forcing me to read the liner notes. What about playing out with bebop lines? So, out. It's interesting with a tune like this, which is very based in... Oh, I want to make this point, though, before I answer this question. So I'm going to do both at the same time. So this tune, by its very nature, is minor in its approach, right? The whole thing is half diminished seventh chords, which by themselves add a ton of dissonance to dominant seventh, minor, to minor, and then the same thing, half diminished seventh, and then it resolves to major. It shouldn't. It should go to minor, but it doesn't. So it's like maybe that's the love part in the song that Cole Porter was talking about. Going to major. So here's the point that I wanted to make that I think is going to help you with your soloing. I talked really earlier about this A flat. That to me is kind of like the center point for the entire improvisation. So there's a lot of things you can do with that. The first one is that when you're talking about your G half diminished scale, it's the flat 9. Then when you get to C7, it's the sharp 5. And then when you get to F minor, it's resolved to that note, which is the third of the chord. So if we focus our soloing on that note, then when you get to D half diminished seventh, it's the flat 9 or the flat 5 of D half diminished seventh. Then it's the flat 9 of G7, and then when you get to C, yes, you're thinking, well, how does C and A flat fit together? They don't, but it's part of the bebop scale. So if you look at the bebop scale for C, the passing note is A flat. So when we get to C, I'm going to play a bebop scale. Watch this. So see what I did there? I just put that A flat in there. So the whole A section and B section and D section is really just surrounding that sort of F minor or the A flat. And that brings into play the blues scale as well. Watch when I play a blues scale over this thing. F blues scale. A flat. So there's a lot of these little sort of, you feel things and hearing your ears, it's like, well, where's the tonal center? To me, that whole tonal center is around A flat. Even when you get to C, it's a passing note in the C bebop scale. All right. And then it switches to more tonal center around the E flat. Yeah. Lawrence says, thanks, Paul. There's more to this song than I initially thought. There's a lot to this song. It may sound like an easy thing, and it is. The chord changes are fairly simple, but if you really get down to the improvisational part, it really lends itself wonderfully to the bebop language. By the way, as a soloist, I think minor keys, which this is really based on, is more conducive, especially in flat keys like B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat. Your fingers sort of fit around minor keys a little bit better than major. For example, D major. It tends to be a lot more major sounding than minor sounding, and your fingers don't fit in those keys, I think, as easily as they do in flat keys. The thought that the song there's more to it than originally thought stems from the fact that you have to really incorporate a wide range of bebop ideas in order to get to the soloing part of this tune. And your hands need to move over time to the rhythm and the feel of bebop. That's a very broad statement, which basically means practice your butt off until it becomes natural. Interesting thing, too, about this bebop scale. Anything to do with bebop scales and no matter what chord you're playing over, think some shortcuts in your head could be diminished scales. So, for example, the diminished scale for this would be this. Right? Half whole, half whole, half whole, half whole. And then there's patterns to do. And those things make interesting sounds within your playing. Let's see if we can incorporate some of that in addition to the bebop ideas. That whole thing was diminished scale. Yeah, Lawrence says woodshed it. That's really the only way you're going to get to this, is to do that. I think I've accomplished what I set out to do today, which was really explain the sounds and the language and the style of creating what we call sweet bebop lines. So I'm going to play a little bit more for you like I normally do. If you haven't had a chance to do it, please go and download the sheet music. It's still pinned to the top of the chat. I will remove it after this session is over, so please grab it. Let me put Well, no, I'm going to leave the sheet music off your screen and just play a little bit. And let me know some of the sounds that you hear. I'm going to incorporate a lot of the ideas that we talked about today. That's typically why I like to play at the end as well as the beginning, because a lot of the things that we talked about, I really want to sort of feed into my playing. See if you can pick them out. All right, that'll do it for this week. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. My name is Paul Tobey. I hope everybody had a nice time. Please grab the sheet music before the end of the session. And for everyone that has chimed in on the chat, it's been a real pleasure talking with you today. I realize that a lot of today might have seemed a little bit advanced for you, but really my goal is to share what your goal is, and that's to be a great jazz musician. And that's what I've always aspired to be, and I hope that's what you aspire to be too. We have to keep this music alive because it's so important, and it just sounds great to my ears, and I've always just really wanted to play it well, and I hope and I wish the best for you as well. So from me to you in Niagara-on-the-Lake here in Canada on this really cold and rainy day, thanks for hanging out with me. You've made it a lot of fun, and all your comments and suggestions have been great. If you could, one little favor, when the video is done, go make a comment on the video itself, not in the chat, because it really helps us reach a wider audience. Comments are one of the most important things in the YouTube algorithm to help the video reach a larger audience. And for those of you that have been here for the first time, I hope you had a good time. And we will see everybody next week, same time, same place, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for those of you that are praying for Nancy, I really appreciate that. It means a lot to us in this time. Have a great day.